When 12-year-old Emma Rodriguez made eye contact with a leather-vested stranger across a Walmart parking lot in Phoenix, Arizona, and silently mouthed three devastating words, "I'm not safe," while standing beside a woman who was gripping her arm hard enough to leave marks. She didn't know that the man she'd chosen to trust was Cole Reaper Dalton, vice president of the Desert Kings Motorcycle Club and a former Child Protective Services investigator who'd spent 15 years learning to read the exact kind of terror he saw in her eyes. What started as a routine Saturday afternoon supply run would turn into a coordinated parking lot lockdown involving 8 bikers, mall security, and Phoenix Police Department's Specialized Crimes Unit, and would expose a foster care placement that had gone catastrophically wrong 3 months earlier when the system failed to catch warning signs that were obvious to anyone who knew how to look. This is the story of how one girl's desperate silent plea and one man's refusal to dismiss what he saw would prove that sometimes the most dangerous places for children aren't with strangers, but within systems designed to protect them, and that trusting a child's fear matters more than trusting official paperwork. The Walmart Supercenter on West Bethany Home Road in Phoenix was doing the kind of business it always did on Saturday afternoons in late October. Families stocking up for the week, people grabbing last-minute Halloween decorations. The usual flow of American consumer life playing out under fluorescent lights and across acres of asphalt. Cole Reaper Dalton pulled his road glide into a parking spot near the garden center entrance, killed the engine, and sat for a moment letting the desert heat wash over him. He was 43 years old, vice president of the Desert Kings MC, with the kind of weathered face that came from 2 decades of Arizona sun and a life that hadn't been particularly easy. His vest told part of his story: Desert Kings rocker across broad shoulders, VP patch, veteran designation showing Army service, various pins and rockers that marked years of riding and brotherhood. What the vest didn't show was his previous life: 15 years as an investigator for Arizona Child Protective Services before the bureaucracy and the cases that went wrong, despite everyone's best efforts, had burned him out so completely, he'd walked away. He'd joined the Desert Kings 5 years ago, looking for the kind of family that didn't come with institutional failure and regulatory handcuffs, looking for a place where protecting people meant actually protecting them rather than documenting why you couldn't. The club had given him that, but it hadn't erased the instincts he'd developed over 15 years of walking into homes and reading situations and knowing within 30 seconds whether a child was safe or performing safety for the adults in the room. Cole was locking his helmet to his bike when he noticed them. A woman in her mid-40s, heavy-set with badly dyed red hair and the kind of artificial smile that didn't reach her eyes, was walking across the parking lot with a girl beside her. The woman's hand was clamped on the girl's upper arm, fingers digging in with the kind of pressure that was about control rather than guidance. The girl was maybe 12 years old, thin in a way that suggested not enough food rather than natural metabolism, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and clothes that didn't quite fit right, a t-shirt that was too small and jeans that were too big, held up with a belt cinched to its tightest notch. But it wasn't the mismatched clothing that caught Cole's attention. It was the girl's face. He'd seen that expression thousands of times in his CPS career, that careful blankness that children learned when showing emotion was dangerous, when any reaction could trigger something bad. Her eyes were down, watching the pavement, her body language screaming submission and fear in a way that made every alarm bell Cole possessed start ringing. This wasn't a kid who'd gotten in trouble and was being marched out of the store. This was a kid who was terrified and trying very hard not to show it. The woman was talking, her voice carrying across the parking lot with that false cheerfulness that adults used when they wanted witnesses to think everything was fine. She was saying something about getting ice cream later if Emma behaved, about how they needed to hurry home because they had company coming. But her grip on the girl's arm never loosened, and the girl's face never changed from that careful mask of nothing. Cole found himself watching them, that old investigator instinct kicking in despite having left the job 5 years ago. They were walking toward a white van parked in the far corner of the lot, the kind of placement that was either coincidence or deliberate isolation from other vehicles. The woman was moving fast, pulling the girl along, and there was something in the urgency of it that felt wrong, felt like someone trying to complete a task before they got caught. Then it happened. The girl turned her head, scanning the parking lot the way Cole had seen 100 frightened kids scan rooms looking for exits or allies or anyone who might help. Her eyes swept past Cole, moved on, then came back and locked on. And in that moment, Cole saw her make a decision, saw this 12-year-old girl calculate risk and odds in desperation and come to the conclusion that this stranger, this big, intimidating biker, might be her only chance. The girl's eyes held his with an intensity that was shocking. She glanced quickly at the woman whose attention was on digging keys out of her purse, then looked back at Cole. And very deliberately, very carefully, she mouthed 3 words, her lips moving in exaggerated shapes to make absolutely certain he understood. "I'm not safe." Cole felt everything in him go cold and sharp. The girl mouthed it again, slower, making sure there was no possibility of misreading. "I'm not safe." Then her eyes flicked toward the white van, back to Cole, and her expression asked the question she couldn't voice. "Will you help me, please? I'm not safe." The woman looked up from her purse, and her grip on the girl's arm tightened. She said something sharp that Cole couldn't hear, and the girl's face went immediately blank again, all emotion shutting down like a switch had been flipped. But she kept her eyes on Cole for 1 more second, a silent, desperate plea, before the woman pulled her the final yards toward the van. Cole made a decision that would either save a child or make him look like a paranoid idiot, and he'd spent enough years in child protection to know that looking like an idiot was an acceptable price for potentially saving a kid. He pulled out his phone, hit the group message for Desert Kings members in the Phoenix area, and typed 4 words that he knew would bring his brothers running. Code Amber, Walmart Bethany, now. Then he walked toward the white van, his phone already dialing 911, his body language deliberately casual, but his path intersecting with theirs before they could get the girl into the vehicle. The woman saw him coming, and her expression shifted from false cheerfulness to wariness. She pulled the girl closer and told Cole he needed to watch where he was walking, her voice sharp with territorial challenge. Cole stopped about 10 feet away, his phone to his ear, and spoke clearly so both the dispatcher and the woman could hear him. "This is Cole Dalton at the Walmart on West Bethany Home Road in Phoenix. I need police here immediately. I've just witnessed a child signal to me that she's not safe. I'm maintaining visual contact and requesting immediate response." The woman's name appears to be using a girl named Emma, white van Arizona plates, and he recited the numbers he'd memorized from 50 feet away. The woman's face went from wary to furious. She demanded to know what he thought he was doing, said this was her foster daughter and they were going home, that Cole needed to mind his own damn business before she called the police on him for harassment. But Cole noticed several things in quick succession. She'd said foster daughter, not daughter, which meant there was paperwork somewhere documenting this placement. She'd threatened to call police but hadn't actually moved to do it. And most importantly, the girl's expression when the woman said they were going home showed pure terror, the kind of fear that no child should feel about the place they're supposed to sleep safely. The dispatcher's voice was sharp and focused, asking Cole to describe what he'd observed. Cole explained calmly that a child had made direct eye contact with him and mouthed that she was not safe, that the woman with her claimed to be a foster parent, that the girl showed signs of physical distress, including what appeared to be finger mark bruising on her upper arm where the woman was gripping her. He said he was a former CPS investigator, and his professional opinion was that this child was in immediate danger and required intervention before she was removed from this public location. The woman was shouting now, calling Cole insane, saying he was harassing them, that Emma was a troubled child who made things up for attention. But her voice had that edge of panic that guilty people got when their cover was being pulled away. And she was looking around the parking lot like she was calculating whether she could get the girl into the van and gone before anyone could stop her. Cole shifted his position slightly, moving so his bike was between the van and the parking lot exit, making it clear without words that he wasn't letting them leave. The girl, Emma, was watching all of this with huge eyes, pressed against the van's sliding door by the woman's grip but not trying to get away, not trying to run, just watching Cole like he was the most important thing in the world. Cole kept his voice calm and steady when he told the woman that police were en route, that if everything was legitimate, as she claimed, then waiting a few minutes to verify wouldn't be a problem. But he wasn't allowing an unsupervised departure when a child had explicitly signaled distress. The sound of motorcycles cut through the parking lot noise, that distinctive Harley rumble that made people turn and look. 3 bikes came around the corner of the lot, Desert King's patches visible, and pulled up in a loose formation that effectively blocked the lane the van was parked in. Cole's brothers Axe, Gunner, and Viper killed their engines and dismounted, reading the situation instantly from Cole's body language and positioning themselves so the van was now surrounded by bikes and bodies that would make leaving extremely difficult. The woman's panic was visible now. She was still shouting about harassment and her rights, but her free hand was shaking and her eyes kept darting between the bikers in the parking lot and the girl whose arm she was still gripping hard enough to make the child wince. Cole told his brothers quietly that he had 911 on the line, that a child had signaled distress, that they were maintaining the scene until police arrival. Axe, who was 6'6" and built like a wall, positioned himself directly in front of the van's driver door. Gunner moved to the passenger side. Viper stayed near Cole, his phone out recording everything in case there were later questions about what happened and why. More bikes arrived, the group message bringing Desert King's members from across the valley. Within 5 minutes, there were 8 motorcycles forming a perimeter around the white van, 8 large men in leather, making it very clear that this vehicle wasn't going anywhere until authorities arrived and the child's safety was verified. Other Walmart customers were starting to notice and gather at a distance, phones out, that modern instinct to document anything unusual. The woman tried a different tactic, her voice going softer, pleading. She told Cole that Emma had behavioral problems, that she made up stories, that Cole was falling for manipulation from a child who'd been through multiple foster placements because she couldn't follow rules. She said Emma would say anything to get attention, would claim abuse when there was none, that Cole was making a terrible mistake and traumatizing a child who just needed stability and structure. Cole had heard variations of this speech 100 times in his CPS career. Abusers always had explanations for why the child was lying, why the bruises were from clumsiness, why the fear was manufactured drama. And sometimes they were even partially right. Some kids did have behavioral issues and did manipulate situations. But Cole had also learned to trust children's body language over adults' words, and Emma's body language was screaming that she was terrified of this woman and desperate to get away from her. He knelt down slowly, making himself less threatening, and spoke directly to Emma, whose face was still carefully blank. His voice was gentle when he asked her name, asked if she felt safe, asked if she wanted to talk to police when they arrived. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall, clearly terrified of showing emotion in front of the woman. She nodded once, quickly, and whispered so quietly, Cole almost missed it, that she wanted to talk to police, that she wasn't safe, that please don't let her take me back there. The woman jerked Emma backward and told Cole he had no right to talk to her daughter, that he was interfering with a legal placement, that she had documentation proving Emma was in her custody. But her voice was shrill now, desperate, and Cole noticed she'd shifted from saying foster daughter to just daughter, the kind of inconsistency that liars made under pressure. He stood slowly and told the woman very calmly that he understood she had concerns, but police were 90 seconds out and everyone could wait together until they arrived to sort everything out properly. 2 Phoenix Police Department cruisers pulled into the parking lot with lights but no sirens, approaching quickly but not creating the kind of scene that would panic everyone in the vicinity. 4 officers emerged, and the lead officer, a man in his late 30s with sergeant stripes named Ortiz, took in the situation with experienced eyes. He saw 8 bikers in Desert King's patches positioned around a white van, saw a woman who looked panicked and angry, saw a thin girl who looked terrified, and saw Cole, who was clearly the one who'd called this in, standing with his phone still connected to dispatch. Ortiz approached Cole first and asked him to explain what was happening. Cole identified himself as former Arizona CPS investigator, explained that the child had made direct eye contact and silently communicated that she was not safe, that the woman claimed to be her foster parent, and that he'd maintained the scene to prevent the child's removal until authorities could verify her safety. He pointed out visible bruising on Emma's arm where the woman was still gripping her, noted the child's body language and effect, and said his professional opinion based on 15 years of child welfare experience was that this placement needed immediate investigation. Ortiz nodded and turned to the woman, asking for identification and documentation of her relationship to the child. The woman, who identified herself as Sharon Henley, produced a driver's license and then pulled out paperwork from her purse showing she was a licensed foster parent with Arizona Department of Child Safety and that Emma Rodriguez had been placed in her care 3 months ago. Her voice was calmer now, more controlled, as she explained that Emma had reactive attachment disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, that she frequently made false allegations, that this was exactly the kind of manipulative behavior that had gotten her removed from 2 previous placements. Ortiz examined the paperwork while his partner, Officer Kim, knelt down to talk quietly with Emma. Cole watched the interaction carefully. Kim was using proper trauma-informed interview techniques, asking open-ended questions, giving Emma space and time to respond, not leading or pressuring. And Emma, after a long moment of silence, started talking in a voice so quiet the officers had to lean in to hear her. She said Sharon hit her when she made mistakes, that Sharon locked her in a room for hours, sometimes all day, when she didn't do chores fast enough, that Sharon's boyfriend touched her in ways that made her uncomfortable, and when Emma told Sharon about it, Sharon said she was lying and attention-seeking and locked her in her room for 2 days with only water. Emma said she'd tried to tell her caseworker during the last home visit, but Sharon had been in the room the whole time, and Emma was too scared to say anything with Sharon right there listening. She said today was the first time Sharon had taken her out of the house in 3 weeks, and Emma had been watching for someone, anyone, who might help, because she knew if she went back to that house, something really bad was going to happen. Officer Kim's expression shifted as Emma talked, that professional mask cracking slightly to show anger and grief underneath. She asked Emma to show her the bruises she mentioned, and the girl hesitantly pulled up her sleeves to reveal bruising in various stages of healing on both arms, the kind that came from being grabbed and restrained repeatedly. She lifted her shirt slightly to show more bruising on her ribs. When Kim asked about the boyfriend touching her, Emma's face went carefully blank again, and she said she didn't want to talk about that part yet, not here. But yes, it happened, and yes, Sharon knew, and yes, Sharon didn't protect her. Sharon was protesting loudly now, saying Emma was lying, that those bruises were from Emma hurting herself for attention, that the boyfriend allegation was completely fabricated, that this was exactly the kind of manipulation she'd warned everyone about. But Ortiz had already radioed for a CPS emergency response team and was speaking quietly with another officer about securing the scene and getting Sharon separated from Emma immediately. Cole stood back and let the professionals work, but he kept his position between Sharon and Emma, his brothers maintaining their perimeter, making it clear without words that this child was protected now and wasn't going anywhere with Sharon Henley, regardless of what paperwork said. More police arrived, an unmarked detective's car, and a CPS emergency response worker pulled up in an agency vehicle looking harried and concerned. The CPS worker, a woman in her 50s named Patricia Gonzalez, spoke briefly with the officers and then approached Cole. She told him she remembered him from his years with the agency, that she'd heard he left, but was glad to see he was still protecting kids. Cole gave her a detailed rundown of what he'd observed: Emma's silent communication, the visible signs of distress and fear, the bruising, Sharon's inconsistent statements, and defensive behavior. Patricia listened carefully, took notes, and then spent 20 minutes talking with Emma while the girl sat in the back of a police car with the door open, finally separated from Sharon, who was being interviewed by detectives 30 yards away. When Patricia emerged from talking with Emma, her face was grim. She told Ortiz and Cole quietly that Emma had disclosed significant physical abuse, food deprivation, isolation, and sexual abuse by Sharon's boyfriend, with Sharon's knowledge and failure to protect. Patricia said she was immediately removing Emma from the placement, that criminal charges would be filed against both Sharon and the boyfriend, and that she was personally going to review how this placement had been approved and why 3 months of warning signs had apparently been missed by the assigned caseworker. She explained to Cole that Emma had been in foster care for 2 years after being removed from her biological mother for neglect. She'd had 2 previous placements that disrupted due to Emma's behavioral issues, and the file had noted her as a difficult placement with trust issues and tendency toward making allegations. Patricia said bitterly that Emma's history of crying wolf had apparently made everyone stop listening when she was actually being hurt, the exact situation child welfare was supposed to prevent but too often created through systemic failures. Cole felt sick. This was why he'd left CPS, this exact scenario where a child's legitimate cries for help were dismissed as behavioral problems because adults had decided she wasn't credible. He asked Patricia where Emma would go now, and she said emergency shelter placement tonight, then hopefully a therapeutic foster home with people who actually knew how to handle traumatized kids, and absolutely not back to Sharon Henley, who would be losing her foster care license immediately pending criminal investigation. Patricia walked over to Cole's brothers, who were still maintaining their perimeter around the van, clearly having no intention of leaving until they knew Emma was safe. She thanked them for their intervention, said most people would have looked away or convinced themselves it wasn't their business, that their willingness to act on a child's silent plea had potentially saved Emma from escalating abuse or worse. Axe, the biggest and most intimidating of them, had tears in his eyes when he said they'd do it again every time, that protecting kids was what men were supposed to do, that anyone who'd hurt a child deserved whatever came to them. Sharon Henley was arrested on scene for child abuse and contributing to the endangerment of a minor. Detectives went immediately to her home with a warrant to arrest the boyfriend and document evidence. Emma was transported to a child advocacy center where she could give a detailed forensic interview in a safe environment and receive immediate trauma support. Before she left, Emma asked if she could talk to the biker man one more time. Patricia brought her over to where Cole was standing with his brothers. Emma looked up at him, this small 12-year-old who'd been through hell and had found the courage to ask one more stranger for help when everyone else had failed her. And she told him, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not ignoring me like everyone else did." Her voice was stronger now, not that terrified whisper from before, but carrying the fragile hope of someone who'd been rescued and might actually be safe now. Cole knelt down to her level and told her she saved herself by being brave enough to ask for help, that all he did was pay attention when she communicated what she needed. He said he was proud of her for not giving up even when adults weren't listening, for trusting her instincts about who might help, for being smart and strong enough to keep fighting for her own safety. He told her that what Sharon and her boyfriend did wasn't her fault, that the adults who should have protected her failed in their jobs, but that didn't mean Emma was unworthy of protection or that her voice didn't matter. Emma asked him why he helped when other people didn't, when everyone else just walked by or didn't notice or didn't care. Cole told her he used to work in child protection, that he'd seen too many kids get hurt because adults looked away, and he'd promised himself he would never be someone who saw a child in trouble and did nothing. He said sometimes people don't help because they're scared of being wrong or making things awkward, but being wrong is better than letting a kid stay in danger, always. The girl nodded and then hugged him quickly before Patricia gently guided her toward the waiting car. Cole watched them drive away, Emma's small face visible through the rear window, watching the Desert King's bikers who'd formed a wall of protection around her when she'd needed it most. Several of his brothers were crying openly now, these hard men who'd lived rough lives breaking down at the sight of a child who'd been failed by everyone except the stranger she'd trusted in a parking lot. If this story is reminding you that children in the foster care system are especially vulnerable because their histories of trauma can make adults dismiss their legitimate cries for help, that looking intimidating doesn't mean someone won't protect the vulnerable, and that trusting a child's fear matters more than trusting official documentation, then what happened next matters because the ripples from one moment of paying attention would extend far beyond a Walmart parking lot. The story made local news within hours. Bikers rescue. Foster child from abusive placement was the headline, with photos of Desert Kings members at the scene and interviews with Officer Ortiz praising their intervention. The Arizona Department of Child Safety launched an immediate investigation into how Sharon Henley had maintained her foster license, despite what would turn out to be a history of complaints, how Emma's caseworker had missed signs during home visits, and why Emma's previous allegations had been dismissed as behavioral issues rather than investigated properly. What they found was damning. Sharon Henley had been investigated twice before for allegations from previous foster children, but both investigations had been closed as unfounded because the children making allegations were deemed not credible due to behavioral problems. Emma had tried to tell her caseworker during supervised visits, but the caseworker had conducted all visits with Sharon present, giving Emma no safe opportunity to disclose. The boyfriend had a criminal history that should have prohibited him from living in a foster home, but somehow that hadn't been caught during home assessments. Sharon's boyfriend was arrested and charged with multiple counts of child sexual abuse. Sharon herself faced charges of child abuse, failure to protect, and filing false reports. Both eventually pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received significant prison time. Emma's assigned caseworker was fired for negligence. The department implemented new protocols requiring private interviews with foster children and more thorough background checks on all household members. Patricia Gonzalez called Cole a week after the parking lot incident to update him on Emma's placement. The girl was in a therapeutic foster home with a couple who specialized in trauma care and who actually understood that behavioral issues were symptoms of abuse rather than reasons to dismiss abuse allegations. Emma was in intensive therapy, was starting to talk about what she'd been through, was slowly learning to trust again. Patricia said Emma talked about Cole frequently, about the biker man who saw her when she thought she was invisible, who believed her when everyone else called her a liar. Cole asked if he could stay updated on Emma's progress, and Patricia said absolutely, that she'd keep him informed with Emma's permission. Over the following months, Cole received occasional updates. Emma was doing better, adjusting to her new placement, engaging in therapy, starting to show the kind of healing that was possible when children were actually protected rather than just moved between dangerous situations. Her new foster parents were patient and trauma-informed and committed to helping her recover from years of system failures and abuse. 6 months after the Walmart parking lot incident, Emma asked through Patricia if she could meet with Cole again. They arranged to meet at a park with Patricia present, following proper protocols for contact between a child in care and an adult outside her placement. Emma arrived looking healthier than she had in the parking lot, less frighteningly thin, with color in her face and something approaching peace in her eyes. She was still cautious, still carrying the weight of what she'd been through, but she was visibly healing in ways that made Cole's chest tight with relief. Emma told Cole she wanted to thank him properly. Not just the quick words in a parking lot, but really thank him for saving her life. She said her therapist helped her understand that she'd been in real danger, that Sharon and the boyfriend were escalating, that if Cole hadn't stopped the van that day, something really bad was going to happen. She said she'd tried to signal other people before, at a grocery store once and at a doctor's office, but nobody paid attention or nobody wanted to get involved. Cole was the first person who actually saw her and actually did something. Cole told her again that she saved herself by being brave enough to keep asking for help, but Emma shook her head. She said bravery only matters if someone responds to it, that she could be as brave as she wanted, but if everyone ignored her, then bravery was useless. She said Cole didn't ignore her, and that made all the difference. That made bravery actually work. Her voice was steady when she said she wanted to be someone who paid attention when she grew up, who helped kids the way Cole helped her, who didn't look away when children were trying to say they needed help. Patricia told Cole privately that Emma's progress was remarkable, that children who'd been through what Emma experienced often struggled for years or never fully recovered. But Emma had something many didn't have, a concrete memory of an adult who believed her and acted to protect her when it mattered most. That experience was helping Emma rebuild her ability to trust, to believe that some adults were safe, that asking for help could actually work if you found the right person to ask. The Desert Kings Motorcycle Club started a program after Emma's rescue called See the Signs, partnering with Arizona CPS to train foster parents, teachers, and community members to recognize when children were silently communicating distress. They taught people that kids in danger often can't or won't verbally disclose abuse, that they communicate through body language and stolen glances and desperate silent signals that require adults to actually pay attention. They taught that children with histories of behavioral problems or previous allegations deserve even more scrutiny rather than less, because abusers specifically target children they know won't be believed. Cole became the program's primary instructor, using his 15 years of CPS experience combined with his brotherhood's commitment to protecting the vulnerable. He taught hundreds of people over the years how to read the signs he'd read in that parking lot, how to trust their instincts when something felt wrong, how to be willing to intervene even when it was awkward or they might be mistaken. He always started his presentations with Emma's story, with 3 words mouthed silently across a parking lot that could have been missed or ignored or dismissed, but weren't. The program saved other kids. Teachers who took the training recognized signs of abuse they might have previously missed. Foster parents learned to look deeper than surface behavior. Community members became willing to call authorities when they witnessed concerning interactions instead of assuming someone else would handle it. Over 5 years, the See the Signs program was credited with contributing to 17 child abuse investigations that led to children being removed from dangerous situations and placed in safety. Emma grew up knowing that her voice mattered, that her fear had been legitimate, that the adults who failed to protect her were wrong, and the stranger in a parking lot who believed her was right. She became an advocate for foster youth, speaking at conferences about the importance of listening to children in care, about how behavioral problems are often trauma responses rather than character flaws, about how one person paying attention can change everything. When Emma turned 18 and aged out of foster care, she'd been with her therapeutic foster family for 5.5 years. They'd offered to adopt her and she'd agreed, finally having the permanent family she'd needed her entire life. At her high school graduation, Emma wore her cap and gown and gave a speech about resilience and second chances and the importance of adults who choose to see children who are trying to be seen. She thanked her adoptive parents, her therapist, Patricia Gonzalez, and the biker man who'd refused to let a van leave a parking lot until he knew she was safe. Cole sat in the audience with his Desert Kings brothers, watching this young woman who'd been a terrified 12-year-old, silently begging for help, who'd grown into someone strong and whole and determined to help other kids the way she'd been helped. When Emma called him out by name in her speech, thanking him for seeing her when she thought she was invisible, 8 bikers in leather vests stood and applauded while tears ran down their faces. These hard men who understood that protecting the vulnerable was the highest calling any person could have. After the ceremony, Emma found Cole and hugged him, this young adult who'd survived hell and come out the other side, determined to make meaning from her pain. She told him she was going to college to study social work, that she wanted to be a CPS investigator like he used to be, that she wanted to be the kind of person who actually protected kids instead of just moving them between bad situations. Cole told her she'd be amazing at it, that her lived experience would make her see things other people missed, that the system needed people like her who understood from the inside what it meant to need help and not receive it. Emma asked him why he'd left CPS if he was so good at protecting kids, why he'd walked away from work that obviously mattered to him. Cole was quiet for a moment before telling her the truth, that he'd left because he couldn't handle the failures anymore, couldn't handle seeing kids get hurt because of bureaucracy and understaffing and system limitations. But he said meeting her had shown him that leaving the formal system didn't mean leaving the work, that he could still protect kids through his club and his program and by simply paying attention in parking lots when children were trying to communicate that they weren't safe. The story of Emma and the Desert Kings became a case study used in social work programs across Arizona as an example of community intervention and the importance of trauma-informed response. It became a reminder to CPS workers and foster parents that children with behavioral histories deserved belief and protection, not dismissal and skepticism. It became a training example for law enforcement about how to recognize legitimate distress versus manipulation, and why erring on the side of protection was always the right choice. Cole kept a photo in his wallet of Emma at her high school graduation, cap and gown and huge smile. Transformed from the terrified child who'd mouthed 3 words across a parking lot into a young woman who'd survived and was determined to help others survive too. It was a reminder that one moment of paying attention, one decision to act instead of looking away, one choice to believe a child over official assurances could literally save a life and change a future. Think about the children you pass in parking lots and stores and public spaces, the ones who might be trying to communicate something wrong in the only ways they can. Think about how many Emmas are out there right now, in systems designed to protect them, but failing them catastrophically, trying desperately to signal adults that they're not safe. Would you notice? Would you act? Would you be willing to block an exit and call police and risk being wrong if there was even the smallest chance a child needed help? Sharon Henley served 12 years in prison. Her boyfriend served 23. Emma Rodriguez earned her master's degree in social work and became a CPS investigator, known for her ability to connect with traumatized children and her absolute refusal to dismiss allegations from kids with behavioral issues. And Cole Dalton still rides with his Desert Kings brothers, still teaches the See the Signs program, still believes that the most important thing any adult can do is pay attention when children are trying to say they need help, even when they're saying it silently, even when everyone else has decided they're not worth believing. Share this story if it reminded you that foster children are especially vulnerable and deserve adults who will believe them, that behavioral problems are often symptoms of abuse rather than reasons to dismiss abuse allegations, that paying attention in public spaces can save lives, and that sometimes 3 words mouthed silently across a parking lot are all it takes to save a child if someone is watching who cares enough to act. Because Emma was right. Bravery only matters if someone responds to it, and every person willing to see and believe and act becomes the response that makes a child's bravery actually work.